If you think the T-Rex was the first king of terror, you have been lied to by every movie poster since the 90s. Long before the first feathered raptor poked its head through a prehistoric fern, the Earth was already a churning meat grinder of teeth, serrated blades, and chemical warfare. We are talking about creatures that didn't just hunt, they revolutionized murder. Wait, put that down. Don't touch the Gorgonopsid, you absolute idiot! Look at those teeth. Those aren't for chewing. Those are meat saws designed to slice through muscle like a hot wire through butter. Our little paper-thin explorer is about to find out exactly why the Permian period was the original house of horrors. And honestly, I am not sure he is going to make it to page 2. Welcome back to the Ledger. If you are new here, I am the one holding the pencil, and this nervous stick figure shivering next to me is our expedition lead. We are currently digging into the archives of the Permian, a time period so brutal it makes the Jurassic look like a petting zoo. People often glaze over the era before dinosaurs, assuming it was just a dull waiting room for the main event. But that is a massive mistake. The Permian was a laboratory of biological engineering. Hey, watch the ink! You are standing right in the trajectory of a Dimetrodon's gaze! Move! There he goes, skidding across the page again. Poor guy never learns.
Today, we are dissecting the blueprints of the Earth's first serial killers. We are looking at the invention of the vertebrate predator, the evolution of the shearing bite, and the cold, calculated efficiency of beasts that didn't have to worry about asteroids. They only had to worry about being the biggest, sharpest thing in the swamp. We are breaking down the anatomy of ancient terror, from the mechanics of their jaw pressure to the sheer nightmare of their hunting tactics. Grab your supplies, keep your limbs inside the margins, and try not to get stepped on by a predator that has been extinct for 250 million years. It is time to see how the world really learned to kill.
Look, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that the ocean today is a terrifying place, filled with shadows and teeth. But before there were sharks, before there were whales, and long before anything with a backbone even thought about crawling onto land, the ocean floor was a war zone governed by geometry and raw, unadulterated appetite. Hold on. Hold that thought. I am trying to get this ruler positioned right. This is a standard wooden yardstick, which, as you can see, is completely inadequate for measuring an anomalocaris. My little stick figure arms are shaking here because this thing is massive. 6 feet. That is the size of a very tall, very angry human. But this creature was not a person. It was a nightmare wrapped in a segmented, chitinous shell. Imagine drifting through the clear, shallow waters of the Cambrian period. You are just a trilobite minding your own business, and suddenly 2 giant stalked eyes fixate on you. They were the first true apex predators to grace this planet. I am standing right next to a life-size sketch of one now, and if I hold my breath, I can almost feel the water displacement from those frontal appendages. They were not just grasping hooks, they were precision-engineered biological pincers designed to pull prey into a terrifying pineapple-shaped mouth. Ooh, watch it. The floor is slippery. I am trying to get a read on the grip strength of an Eurypterid, one of those sea scorpions that basically decided to become the tank of the ancient world. I have rigged up this old spring-loaded bathroom scale to see how hard those claws could clamp down. If I just lean in here, and there goes the scale. My hands are vibrating. Seriously, these guys were applying pressure that would turn a modern armored diver into a crushed soda can in seconds. We are talking about creatures that reached lengths of 2.5 meters, patrolling the mudflats like armored wrecking balls. But let us level up the scale, shall we? Because evolution loves a good arms race. Move a few million years forward into the Devonian, and you run into the Dunkleosteus. I am drawing it now, but I need more paper. Seriously, this thing is 10 meters long. Imagine a school bus. Now, paint that bus with heavy, jagged bone plates. Put a pair of self-sharpening guillotine blades in its mouth and throw it into a dark, murky sea. A standard yellow school bus is about 10 meters long, which means if you parked a Dunkleosteus next to one, they would be mirror images. Only the bus does not have a bite force of 5,000 newtons at the tip of its jaws.
This creature was not just big. It was a hydraulic press with an attitude problem. When those jaws snapped shut, the vacuum effect alone would drag in anything nearby before the teeth even made contact. I am standing here sketching its jawline, and I honestly feel like I am standing in the path of a moving train. It is humbling, really. You look at these proportions and realize that we are just lucky we arrived when we did. Or maybe not. At least when I measure these monsters, I only lose a wooden ruler. If I were actually in the water with them, I think my survival prospects would be somewhere between snack and forgotten appetizer.
If you are enjoying this deep dive into the prehistoric armory, make sure you are subscribed to the Ledger. We spend way too much time getting crushed by ancient biology, so you do not have to. And I would hate for you to miss the next chapter of this fossilized chaos.
Look, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that the ocean today is a terrifying place, filled with shadows and teeth. But before there were sharks, before there were whales, and long before anything with a backbone even thought about crawling onto land, the ocean floor was a war zone, governed by geometry and raw, unadulterated appetite.
I am trying to draw the
Hold
scale
on,
of this thing.
I am trying to draw the scale of this thing, but my hand keeps shaking. If you look closely at these lines, you realize that the prehistoric sea was not just big, it was a hungry, churning blender of biology. Hey, put that down. You stick figure clown, that is a lethal appendage, not a back scratcher.
Oh, great. Now he is floating away. Let him go. We have a timeline to track, and believe me, you do not want to be near these creatures during their growth spurts. Everything starts small, which is the only reason the rest of us survived the Cambrian. Take the Anomalocaris. We look at them now and see the monster under the bed, but they began as a tiny, soft-bodied larva, drifting in the current like a piece of organic confetti. They were vulnerable, squishy, and essentially a snack for anything with a nervous system. But they were born with a blueprint for absolute chaos. They moved from being passive filter feeders to active hunters with terrifying speed.
In just a few months, they would inflate their size by hundreds of times, hardening their frontal appendages until they were essentially biological grappling hooks. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing you have grown from the size of a grain of sand to a 3-foot-long predator that can crack a trilobite shell like a walnut. That is the sound of a bad day for a trilobite. My little stick figure friend is currently trying to hide behind a calcified brachiopod, which is pointless. You see, the transition from larva to apex ruler for these things wasn't a gentle process. It was a high-stakes race against starvation. They didn't just grow, they evolved their weaponry on the fly. Then we get to the Silurian, the era of the sea scorpion. If you think molting your skin sounds uncomfortable, try doing it when every single thing around you wants to turn you into lunch. These Eurypterids were armored tanks, but every time they outgrew their exoskeleton, they had to crack it open and crawl out, leaving them soft, rubbery, and completely defenseless. That is the sound of a sea scorpion trying to find a rock crevice before the neighbors notice it is currently a naked, jelly-like mess. It is an evolutionary bottleneck of the highest order. Most of them didn't make it, but the ones that did, they came back bigger, with serrated pincers and thick chitinous plating that could withstand direct impacts. They survived by becoming faster at shedding, spending less time vulnerable and more time reclaiming their spot at the top of the food chain. It is a brutal game of hide and seek, where the loser ends up in the stomach of the winner. And then we have the real nightmare, the Dunkleosteus. When these fish were juveniles, they were actually quite sleek, almost graceful. They spent their youth darting through the shallows, feeding on soft prey, avoiding the larger giants. But watch closely as they mature. Their skulls began to thicken, depositing dense, heavy layers of bone that served as both armor and a weapon. They didn't have teeth in the traditional sense. They had self-sharpening blades of bone. As a juvenile turned into an adult, its head became a heavy, crushing guillotine. It is a biological transformation that turns a streamlined swimmer into a lumbering, invincible fortress. I am watching our little stick figure assistant try to measure the thickness of a juvenile Dunkleosteus skull, and he just tripped into a pile of sediment. See, that is why you do not investigate the growth phases of prehistoric giants without wearing a helmet. Nature does not provide second chances to those who stand too close to the teeth. These creatures moved from the fringes, the small, the easily eaten, the overlooked, to absolute masters of their biomes by simply being better at surviving the most fragile moments of their development. If you have ever felt like you were just trying to survive your own version of a growth spurt, hit that subscribe button. We are constantly digging into the mechanics of how life finds a way to become top tier, and you definitely do not want to miss our next breakdown of the weapons they developed along the way. Look, I know what you are thinking. You are thinking that the ocean today is a terrifying place, filled with shadows, teeth. But before there were sharks, before there were whales, and long before anything with a backbone even thought about crawling onto land, the ocean floor was a war zone, governed by geometry and raw, unadulterated appetite. Hold on. Wait, where did my pencil go? Did that trilobite just steal my eraser? Whatever. Let us look at what these monsters were packing. If you wanted to survive the Cambrian, you did not need a weapon. You needed an overhaul of physics. Oh, hey, look at this. These are the eyes of an Anomalocaris. They were basically the first high-definition cameras in the history of life. 16,000 individual lenses jammed into a single globe. Think about that. While the rest of the world was basically bumping into walls, this thing could count the hairs on your arms from 10 feet away. I actually tried to construct a replica set of these goggles to see what the view was like. Ouch. Okay, clearly depth perception is not included in the design. I just walked face first into a limestone pillar. It is like looking through 1,000 broken shards of glass. How they did not get a headache navigating the reef is beyond me. Now, let us talk about the Eurypterids, or sea scorpions. People hear scorpion and they think of that little thing that hides in your shoes. These guys were 6 feet of armored misery. Their party trick was that tail. It was not just a prop, it was a hydraulic whip. I have calculated the flick speed here. It hits in about 40 milliseconds. For context, you are still blinking while the tail has already pierced your armor. I am standing here holding a stopwatch, and honestly, if one of these things was chasing me, I would not even have time to scream. I would just be a snack before my brain registered that I was in danger. Whoa, everything is getting dark. Why is the water moving so fast? It feels like a drain opening up in the middle of the ocean. Ah, wait, this is the Dunkleosteus. This fish was a tank with a garbage disposal for a face. It did not have teeth, which sounds like a disadvantage until you realize it had serrated bony plates. The way it fed was through something called mandibular suction. In less than 20 milliseconds, it could open its mouth so fast that it created a vacuum, literally sucking the prey right into its gullet before the water could even settle.
No! Get me out of here! I am just a stick figure! I am not meant to be digested in a prehistoric meat grinder!
Okay, I am out. I was too close. The wildest part? Those plates were self-sharpening. Every time the Dunkleosteus opened and closed its mouth, those top and bottom plates ground against each other. It was basically a natural sharpening stone. It stayed razor sharp without ever needing a whetstone or a dentist. It is efficient, it is brutal, and it is a complete nightmare for anything made of soft tissue. If you are enjoying these deep dives into the mechanics of ancient horror, make sure you are subscribed to the Ledger. We have more creature files coming, and I would really prefer not to be the only thing getting eaten on this channel. Look, I know what you were thinking. You are thinking that the ocean today is a terrifying place filled with shadows and teeth. But before there were sharks, before there were whales, and long before anything with a backbone even thought about crawling onto land, the ocean floor was a war zone governed by geometry and raw, unadulterated appetite. Hold on. Ouch! My left arm is literally stuck in the gape of this armored nightmare. How are you doing? I'm here dangling inside the jaw of a beast that doesn't even have teeth, just blades of sharpened bone that function like a guillotine. You see, our armored friend here, the Dunkleosteus, isn't just a fish. It is a biological tank that forgot to stop evolving. If we were to drop a modern human into the Devonian Sea, you wouldn't even have the luxury of being stalked. It would be a blink of an eye, a sharp snap of locking plates, and you would be a memory before your brain processed the change in water pressure. We like to think of ourselves as the masters of the planet. But standing here, watching this thing turn a shark the size of a surfboard into confetti, I feel like a snack-sized stick figure. Think about the scale for a second. We fear great white sharks, and rightly so, but they are surgical instruments. This thing, it is a blunt force trauma machine. It does not hunt. It deletes obstacles. Imagine the chaos if these things still patrolled our current coasts. We spend our summers at the beach worried about small, manageable threats. But the ancient seas didn't have room for fear. They only had room for survival. The irony is, for all that armor and all that crushing power, the Dunkleosteus eventually vanished. The environment shifted. The shallow, oxygen-rich seas dried up or changed their chemistry. And the very specialization that made them kings became their funeral shroud. They couldn't adapt to the cooling waters or the changing diet of a new world. It is a sobering lesson, isn't it? We humans are remarkably good at reshaping our environment to suit our needs, but nature has a way of flipping the table when the atmosphere changes. We are currently presiding over a global ecosystem that is far more fragile than the one these armored juggernauts called home. We see the decline of modern apex predators, the whales, the sharks, the large cats, and we treat it like a distant problem. But history suggests that when the top of the food chain starts to break, the foundation of the house follows soon after. If we lose the masters of our current seas, we lose the balance that keeps our world breathable and stable. I'm starting to think my sketchbook might be the safest place for this beast. Looking at this sketch, it is hard to believe that such a titan once dominated the entirety of the water column. It was a master of its time. Yet even the master is subject to the rules of a changing world. We carry the ghosts of the Devonian in our deep-sea mysteries, but we have a chance to write a different story for the species that exist right now. There.
Gone. Just a phantom on the page. We don't have to let our modern marvels become mere drawings in a dusty book. They are still out there, fighting their own battles against a changing climate and vanishing habitats. Protecting them is not just about sentimentality. It is about keeping the engine of our world running. If you enjoy pulling back the layers of history like I do, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. We have a whole archive of these prehistoric deep dives waiting for you. And your support helps us keep the sketchbook open for the next discovery.
And just like that, the ink dries on another messy chapter of our planet's history. You know, watching the Gorgonopsids rip through the Permian landscape, I get why our poor explorer friend tried to hide behind a stray ink blot. Being a stick figure is hard, but being a soft, fleshy mammal in a world of scaly, saber-toothed nightmares, that is a different kind of terror entirely. We often look back at these creatures as mere monsters, relics of a failed experiment before the age of giants we call dinosaurs. But they were the masters of their own domain, testing the limits of what a predator could be. They were the ones who figured out how to lock jaws, how to track with precision, and how to dominate a world that was literally starving to death. When we lose these stories, we lose the blueprint of how life fights back. Conservation today isn't just about saving the pretty birds or the fuzzy cats. It is about respecting the long, jagged line of survival that connects us to these ancient serial killers. We are the inheritors of their resilience. So, the next time you feel like you are having a rough day, just remember, you are not being hunted by a creature with dog-like teeth and a bite force that could snap a femur like a dry twig. That is a win in my book. Take a second to look around at the world we have now. It is fragile, yes, but it is also a miracle of evolution. Let's make sure we do not turn our own chapter into a sketch that gets erased by history. If you enjoyed this dive into the Permian nightmare, stick around. We have plenty more pages in the ledger, and I promise to keep the explorer out of harm's way. Or at least, I will try. Don't forget to head outside and observe the wild ones left in your own backyard. They are far less likely to eat you, usually. Catch you in the next one.